Here.
Mr. Whittington,
Here.
Mayor Order.
Here. And we do have a quorum tonight, so we can get started. We do have the floor open to public comment. If you're here to speak to the council about something that's not on our agenda tonight, that would be the opportunity. All right, seeing none, then we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Council, you have the agenda in front of you. Do we have any additional items or modifications to tonight's agenda? Then I'd look for a motion to approve our agenda tonight.
I'll motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries. In your packet tonight then, you have the meeting minutes for the October 4th and October 11th meetings. Did anybody find anything in those minutes that need to be corrected or modified? There, we're good. Anyone having any modifications that they found? Then I'll look for a motion to approve the minutes from the October 4th and October 11th meetings.
I'll make that motion.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries. Council, you've got the consent agenda in your packet as well. Does anyone have anything they would like to have pulled for further discussion? I just will make note, item number 12 is a resolution in the consent agenda appointing 2 new members to our active fire department roster. So that's exciting for the city to have new members coming on to the fire department. I know that's always been a struggle to keep the roster full. So if there's nothing else, then I'll look for a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda.
I'll motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Well, that carries. There are no public hearings scheduled for tonight, but we do have some presentations. And so first on our agenda tonight is Dana and Kathy Schnepf, the owners of the Highway 14 self-storage, with us tonight in regard to some questions in regard to building permit valuation and fee reviews. Jennifer, I don't know if you'd like to give a brief rundown here for the council, and then Dana and Kathy, if you have anything you want to add to that for the council.
All right, Mayor and City Council, I thought our building official, Dan Murphy, would be here tonight, so maybe he is on his way. Otherwise, I'll do my best here to try to kind of summarize the meetings we had and where we are right now today. So back in August, a letter was received from Kathy Schnepf, who's here at the meeting tonight, the owner of the Highway 14 mini storage in Eagle Lake. And she had reached out with a concern about the valuation placed on her permit for a new storage building. After receiving her letter, I contacted the city's contracted building official, Dan Murphy, as he sets a valuation on our permits. And then attached to the memo in the packet is his response with some background information. And then following that, a meeting was held on September 9th with the Schnepfs, Mr. Murphy, and myself. And we talked about the concern with the valuation placed on the permit being crossed off and replaced with a higher valuation. And then Mr. Murphy expressed at that time his his rationale for placing a valuation on a project. We also discussed the similar plan fee and how it was applied. So at that meeting, the consensus was to go ahead and refund the permit for the most recent permit pulled because the Schnaps indicated they wouldn't be able to obtain a building to move forward yet in 2022 and 2021. And so at that time, it was discussed that trying to work together and the entire permit fee was reimbursed. And then also at the conclusion of that meeting, it was discussed that Dan would go back and do a review of all the permits issued to date for the mini storage property. And then following his analysis, another meeting was held, and we've reviewed Mr. Murphy's calculations, and those are also included in the council packet starting on page 86. And you'll see Mr. Murphy had calculated according to a square footage amount of $28 for valuation, and he calculates how he came up with the permit fee, the plan fee, and then he includes the state surcharge in the total, and then what would appear to be either an overcharge or an undercharge. And so we can go through that here shortly. But we reviewed that at a meeting with the Schmeps on October 27th. And as was discussed at the meeting, city staff doesn't have the authority to make any changes to past permits, so that's something that would have to be discussed this evening. And so with that, I guess maybe we should turn over to the Schneps and let them give a little bit of their perspective and their concerns.
I'm sorry, yep. If you could just give us your name and address for the record.
Dana Schnepp, 42389 Kearns Drive, North Mankato.
Kathy Schnepp, same address.
I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at this or have any questions yet, if you want us to go into it, or?
I've looked at it a bit, and, Kathy, when you and I talked on the phone too, kind of that was when we're gonna start digging into this, and so I trust that you've had some productive meetings with city staff and the building official. My understanding of kind of where we're at now is that you've withdrawn the permit request for the next building out there until we could kind of get some resolution to
Partly that.
how this was.
Partly that, yeah.
Yeah, the
Difficulty of getting a building cost and some disagreement over the permit fees
Right.
as well.
right.
This would have never came to attention except that I applied for a building permit early on in 2021. And then I applied for a second building because we've already filled up the fourth or fifth building out there. And the fees were quite a bit higher. And so I got looking at it, and I don't know that you see this, but I had 130,000, which I was off 10,000, I'll give you that, because of the price increases. But I came in, I was wondering who crossed it off and just put arbitrary 200,000 on there to build my building, which I know it doesn't cost me 200,000 to build that building, is how this all started.
We've built buildings in multiple locations, cities, they're all similar or same, we know exactly what they cost, per square foot, and the valuation that he put on is way off.
Right.
It was a little concerning to us that he was able to arbitrarily change this, and we found out that he is paid based on the building permit. He raised the amount 54%, which virtually gave himself a 54% raise with the stroke of a pen.
The city doesn't gain any money from that, which was concerning. It all went to the building inspector, so that threw a flag to us to say, how can he do this without even confronting us? And I never would have caught it if we went to bid 2 buildings. I assume that you all know what you're doing.
We've ran into some issues also with the
code that we were under, Brad Potter put us under, a similar plan. So the
Right.
similar plan to us meant the same metal building, electricity on the outside, no water, no sewer, on a cement slab. That to me is a similar building.
It
Or
was
similar
it was a
plan.
master, they called it a master plan. We had submitted a site plan with with all the future
Like
buildings
12 buildings on
engineered,
it.
and we stayed with that, so we thought that's what a master plan was. Apparently, a master plan
If you,
has to do with,
if you change the size, so if you started the master plan at like a 100 by 20, let's just say, and now you build a 150 by 40, it doesn't qualify for the similar master plan, but it's the exact
Even-
same construction.
even though that was exactly what was on our site plan. They knew what buildings we were building, they were numbered, the order we were gonna build them, and even city staff didn't seem to understand it. When we asked about a permit, they said, well, you're under a master building plan, we don't really need new plans as long as you're not changing anything, which we weren't. We built exactly, so there's just a
Exactly,
lot,
but the size is different.
a lot of issues here, and then when we got involved with the building inspector, he's got charts that are showing $80 a square foot when it costs us $20 a square foot to build. And in the end, now, he's come up with a number that's got to do with a residential wood frame structure, which is
$28
Not-
a square foot.
not what we're
That's
building.
not what we're building.
It isn't even
Right.
similar or anything like it. It's been pretty frustrating for us, to say the least.
I know at the meeting that we had, I think we did get out some good things out of the meeting. But yeah, as a layman not knowing, and we're assuming that similar is that, the price right now with the price increase is $23 a square foot, including concrete, which we went round and round with this with insurance too. And I know this doesn't have to do with insurance values, but,
They were using a
they
Marshall
were using a
Swift,
much higher rate or whatever.
Marshall Swift book that showed storage units at $40-some a square foot. And we showed them all of our bills,
I
and this
can-
is not what it costs.
I
And they
can
said,
show
well,
my invoices to replace the
they
building.
said there's no sense in over-insuring, you're never gonna get paid that if it only costs you $20 to build, and that includes actually the concrete. So, they had us fill out a building permit and all this information, and then the building inspector crosses it out and writes his own number in. I don't know why we even put a number in if that's how this is gonna work. We don't know what's in the book or in the charts that he's using, we know what it costs to build, we've built many of them.
Right.
Right, I can just put in the information that I know, size, type of building, the height of the roof or whatever, what it's gonna be used for, what my expenses are for my quotes. The other thing that's concerning is, one of the meetings that we had with Jennifer and Dan, is that they were gonna review the permits, which they did. And the comment from them, not us, was that if there was anything that we were charged over, that we would be reimbursed. If we owed money, they weren't gonna go back on us, so we questioned that. And now it's, they can't make the decision now, y'all have to make the decision, but then why would they say we were gonna be reimbursed for all the amounts that we paid over? So now I don't know what to do. I mean, we had two more buildings planning for next year, at this point. I don't know where we're at and what we wanna do, we wanna move forward.
Mr. Mayor, not to interrupt, and Kathy, I hope you can certainly come here. The reason that they did not reimburse you under that plan or not is based on my advice, because the council really needs to take a review of this matter and make the decision as to what's gonna happen there or not. So I think when Jennifer made the comment that that was probably what her and Mr. Murphy were thinking about doing, unfortunately, I had a different opinion on that, and that's why we're here before the council.
Hey, actually, weren't we issued a check for it?
No, we were issued a check for the last building.
Yeah.
But when you guys, what they said was if they go, when they're gonna we didn't ask them to go through the other permits. We were just questioning why this similar thing doesn't work, or what, it wasn't a similar type of building or whatever. They said that they would reimburse us back. But I can see where you're coming from too, but I'm just saying that now they're backing water on that without talking to council also. So it's concerning. We do build in a lot of different cities.
Well, that's why you're here. That's why you're here in front of the council, so the council, as Chris said, we can make a decision. I did speak with Dan Murphy, and I know there are things in state statute with those charts on how they can value different properties. And so I think what I asked Kathy when we talked on the phone was, if we can see the actual costs, which you have, and I think we have copies of all that from Tracti and your concrete.
For one of the buildings.
Yeah, so basically, we're at
$23 a square foot.
$23 a square foot, and so
41.
if my thinking is correct, I guess the fair way is to say, we have data that we can say this is the valuation, and we should,
And that's really where we're at.
we should use
We're-
that, right, right.
That's where we're at, that's
Now-
where we've been.
We are in a weird time right now, so we've seen lumber costs go skyrocketing. All of us in this room, I'm sure, are gonna see insurance increases based upon the value of our homes going up just for the construction. If we were to rebuild a home, it wasn't what we built it for, so,
And that's kind of what I said, when I turned in the numbers, it was 130. When we got closer to the project and got the actual bids, I was $10,000 short. But 10,000, from 130 to 140 is different from 130 to 200,000, how they just arbitrarily just cross that off without even asking what our buildings are worth or not even explaining it. And I did, I just wrote the check, went home, and I'm like,
Right.
dang, it's not right.
yep, but, unfortunately, that is the statute, where the inspectors can make those valuations, and again, probably the thing that should be discussed is if there is something that changes, and I know, going back, kind of reading through the history, when you first brought the project, I think the chart said, like 40 or 70 or some, crazy amount of dollars from the state chart, and so they brought it down to something, akin to a residential
And I
garage
wasn't
at that
even-
time.
I wasn't even aware of it.
No, you weren't
Till
even
after-
aware
till
of it,
after
I
the
think
fact.
that was how that worked.
74, and then went down to 50 some, and then down to 30, and now he was down to 28.
Right.
But,
So we don't know what, and
It's concerning to me that there's statutes and you say rules that they have to follow, but he admits that there's been mistakes on a majority of our permits. So we haven't been looking at statutes or haven't been following it, there's something is just
I mean,
not
one of
right.
the comments that we got, that they couldn't follow the plan, that master plan that we were on from Brad Porter, was that y'all changed computer systems and they couldn't access it from the old computer system. Then they set up a second master plan.
So we have to
correct?
pay,
Yeah, I mean.
I don't
that-
know, I'm not aware of that. I think there's something called the City Force program that tracks the permits, but that's not anything that I'm involved with. I know Dan Murphy has that on his end, so I can't speak to that.
and
But
we certainly
It was
don't
said
know
that at the meeting,
anything
that
about
the-
it or
that the council meeting, or that the city changed softwares or did something, and they couldn't access the old. And
There's,
that's why a second master plan
We,
was
we
set up,
thought
and
the
we were-
master plan was our site plan, and come to
Right.
find out it's not, that's something totally different, but we
and
didn't
similar
have an
buildings-
understanding of that, and it doesn't seem like when Kathy's dealt with, the personnel at City Hall here, that they didn't understand it either when we applied for the permit. They said, as long as the structure isn't changing, you're covered under your master plan, so.
and I think I can address some of that. I've been here long enough that I think I'm on my 7th city administrator, depending on how we want to call Mr. Potter. Mr. Potter, particularly in the second one, had certain handshake agreements, I'll put them out that way, or he understood what was happening there or not. He didn't necessarily put that in writing and didn't necessarily get council approval for everything that he did, such as the master plan or not. So there is a number of documents or things that happened during his tenure that the documentation is not as clear as that we'd like to see. I wasn't as involved during his second term as I with most of the city administrators, but that's kind of where we're at. For the council, I know Jennifer, when I met with her and Mr. Murphy, she did tell Mr. Murphy that he needs to, in the future, if they're making changes to the applications, particularly large changes, even if his calculations are right, he needs to make the applicants aware of that and kind of show where everything is. We're on the application fees, it should be mathematical because we're using, I don't believe it's, or remember if it's 94, 96 for the 1997, permit fees. So there is a neutral base for everybody to kind of take a look at, just trying to make sure that we have it in the right categories. And that's something that if he thinks that somebody's in the wrong category, you should be talking to him ahead of time. So I think there's a lot of things that we're learned from this where we're going to go forward, where things are going to be better. he would be the first one to admit that there's mathematical errors on some of the stuff there. I'm not certain how that happened or didn't happen. But the council, you've refunded the one permit already. It's just a matter of what you want to do with the other amounts, and if the council wants to give those back, I think that's fine. My concern, and you hear this every time I come in here, is always, are we setting precedent, and how do we go forward on that, and, what do we want to look at going forward? And at some point, you guys may want to consider whether or not the current rate or fees that you're charging for building permits is appropriate, or you want to update it. I know there's been 3 updates since that time, but generally speaking, most cities in this area, I think, are probably where you're at or one behind you.
Yeah, and I don't know if the council is fully aware of how the building permitting charts work. It comes from the International Building Code, so there's a chart in the code that's laid out. We're using the 1997 version, so it's actually a little bit more advantageous to residents, even though you'd say, I'm not so sure about that, but I've talked to Dan about valuation, and he's comfortable still continuing on with the 1997 chart. Otherwise, and I haven't looked to see, what other communities, like what Mankato might be using for their chart, and what the difference is monetarily. But basically, it's a mathematical equation, as Chris said, based upon the valuation. And so then you've got 3 components. You've got a building permit fee, which is the cost for that permit. You've got a plan review fee, which is the cost for the time that the inspector or the reviewer is reviewing the plans to see if they meet the building code. And then there's a state surcharge that's charged to every permit that we pay to the state. And so what they had was a master plan, and each of the buildings was similar, laid out. And then what would happen is that plan review dollar amount gets reduced as a credit, because there's not as much effort going into the review, because it's the same or similar plan.
But the building inspectors told us that's not even accurate. He said anytime you change the size of the building, we didn't change the size of the building from what was on the site plan, but he said every different size of building has to have a new master plan, and you have to go under the full review, even though it is a very similar building. It's 10 feet wider or 20 feet longer.
Every once in a while, you might run into something if a size does change that puts you into a different code requirement. Here you don't have sprinkler systems or anything like that.
He just said if it wasn't exactly, and again, we don't understand these laws and rules. I don't pretend to, but I'm just saying that's what he told us. Another thing here that's really concerning to us is when a $130,000 project gets changed into a $200,000 project, way over and above the permit fees is the property taxes that this is going to cost us. That permit amount goes right to the county. It's what they base the value of your building on. It's thousands of dollars per building per year to raise it up.
Yep.
And we don't feel it's accurate.
So then the question, I guess, to the 2 of you is moving forward. I guess I want to look forward. I want you to continue to expand your business and be successful. I want the city to, do its business and learn from some of these issues. So then the question, I guess, for me is, how do we move forward? And in my opinion, I would move forward knowing you have provided us with costs for the buildings, and that's what we would use for the valuation in lieu of that table which Dan could set.
So that would totally change every permit. All the permits that we did with this city, they were all different. They were all wrong, incorrect, either over and above. If we went back and did the $23 a square foot or $20 a square foot, which it was when we first started building, these numbers would not be in the city's favor at all. I mean, they'd be well in ours, besides the $1,500 that are over.
we've built in a number of
I don't know.
communities, and our experience is dealing with other communities, that's how it's done. It's by what it costs to build the building. Actually, Dan is inspector in some of them communities, and we haven't had these issues.
I haven't looked at those issues, though.
So, as our building permit process, does it say that we're using this grid of,
Yes.
is it the issue that the project was categorized incorrectly? Is that why it categorized higher in the $28 range instead of?
You know,
He can't put us in a category
Right.
that we are, is what he's
But-
telling us.
and we had this same issue honestly with our insurance company.
Okay.
And they were using a Marshall and Swift valuation. You know, the state's got some, so we've actually been through this
You're in a unique,
with our
Yep.
insurance.
right,
And they're like, there's no sense in you paying $40 a square foot insurance when it's $20. So we went through the same information we gave you guys, and they're like, this is it. And we're gonna value it at 20, not 40.
And I think Dan tried to put us in a more appropriate dollar amount category, but then it was a residential garage,
And
which was $28 a square foot, but we're not wood, we're all metal.
Right.
we've looked at
Now I
wood
don't know.
structures, we've owned some wood framed mini storage, and they cost about double to build what these Trockey buildings do.
right.
Oh, totally understandable. So it sounds like the grid potentially is incomplete, that we don't have a place to put it
I
appropriately.
would agree with that.
And/or, my concern is our policy doesn't allow us to pick one or the other, the evaluation off the grid versus, or maybe it does. So,
As a practical matter, it doesn't give us any discretion on that. Or actually, as a technical matter, it doesn't. But as a practical matter, I think that
Right.
the building inspector has done that in the past.
okay.
But that's the part that becomes a concern to me is, if we're not having a straightforward policy, how is it getting applied in different situations?
And retroactive.
And I think you have some questions about the idea, I think everybody hoped that Mr. Murphy would be here tonight, but he's not, so there may be some things that'll have to be addressed with him afterwards. There's some concerns, and I think we've addressed a lot of those concerns with him and kind of going forward. But, I don't know that the council's got enough information to make some of those decisions tonight.
Was there a possibility that we do need to change the policy? This is a big swing from,
Your
actual
policy,
cost
right.
versus.
Your policy is very similar to other cities, and the building inspection amounts, if you change them dramatically, would be problematic, unless you're looking at hiring somebody, on staff to be performing these services.
No,
Then-
yeah,
then
I
things
just
get
wanna
changed, right.
make sure that we're treating everybody that pulls a permit
Right.
similarly, as opposed to, everybody that has an issue
Yeah.
comes before the.
But the building inspector gets to be kind of like the city attorney,
Yeah.
there's, sometimes the city administrator's not necessarily in a position where she has the expertise to go back and question some of the things that are happening. And so the question comes in, where do we get get involved? But I do think that there's certain things that Jennifer's put in place with Mr. Murphy now that, if something of this situation comes up in the future, particularly, there's gonna be modifications, there's at least, somebody besides just him taking a look at that.
That's not
Yeah.
something that should happen ever,
Right.
something that changes outside of your understanding.
We've built multiple buildings in the city of Waseca in different locations using these same valuations. Dan is inspector there, or he's above the inspector there, same company, their boss, I guess, and they've never changed the values on us.
Not that I've seen, no. So I don't know why this.
No, I
one
think
was
there's two
like-
questions in my head. One is, I would say that the evaluation should have never changed like that. And two is the actual original valuation. Why was that so different than the actual cost?
I would have to say we were very upset when the valuations were changed. Jennifer,
We're calm now, kind of.
Jennifer took some heat for that.
We did.
I'm not
Wasn't
certain.
personal.
Yeah. I'm not certain under the schedules that the actual cost comes into play as to what they're looking for valuation of the property. It's really much more what they expect the property is gonna be valued at, and in some degree that makes some sense, because you may have contractors that come in and they have the ability to build something much cheaper than somebody else.
Right.
But to a large degree, that really comes into play and works very well for residential properties, not necessarily as well for commercial properties or properties that don't nicely slot into one of our low categories.
I do want to say that kind of with what I think you're maybe you're not getting at, but when we brought this up, Dan told me that we could not use sweat equity
Insinuated
to
we were
lower
doing,
our
we were doing
prices.
work ourselves.
And I'm like, but we're
This-
not, I'm busy enough, and you own businesses, I own businesses, I can show you the receipts of what it cost me to build that building. The dirt work was done many buildings ago, so we laid out many platforms for existing buildings coming. It's just cheaper to do it 4 or 6 at once, and then instead of doing one by one to get Warnicki's to come in and bring their equipment in. So I kinda took offense to that that's not, I mean, you can call any of my builders, and actually I pay more to have, my concrete guys and my builder build for me because they follow me around, and I don't have to worry about them.
We could
tell
build
them when the date
cheaper.
is there, I give them the $50,000 check, they give it to the driver, and I don't have to set foot on that property unless I want to.
And it's not like these Trockey buildings are a rarity or a strange building. The other mini-storage buildings in town here are the same buildings that were built 15 or 20 years ago, same company, same structure. It's not like this is a total anomaly that you just don't see these.
But Dan also admits that he has valued very many Trockey buildings. It's just a simple metal building. It's, would I want it for my garage? No. Will people rent from it? Yes. It just cost-wise, it's a simplified building to build, quick and affordable.
Mayor and City Council, if you don't mind, I know there's been a lot of questions about the similar plan fees. I did put it up on the screen there, and then I also have a copy of, I guess, a site plan, if you will, that was showing kind of the layout of their buildings, which kind of helps explain a little bit what the different size requirements of not requirements, the different sizes of some of their buildings, if anybody wants to look at that. And then one other thing I did want to mention is I did check with Blue Earth County on the valuation. When a building permit valuation is placed on the permit, is that exactly what people are gonna be taxed? And I got a response, actually from a former councilor, Ryan Short, who works for the county, and said, although a building permit valuation provides the county with an estimate pertaining to the actual cost being completed, it does not affect the valuation because the county has to make its own determination and assign a valuation adjustment independent of the valuation that's included on our permits. I just wanted to clarify that is a response I got from Blue Earth County at least.
Are there any questions from the rest of the council?
Well, maybe I'm listening or hearing this right or wrong, but to me, it sounds like it's not really the policy, it was just filled out wrong or done wrong. So to me, it should be a simple fix, wouldn't you think? Or, I mean, I guess if I'm hearing it right, really what's wrong is he's giving wrong evaluations and filling it out wrong. So is that a policy issue or is that a clerical issue? That's kind of where I'm at.
The question is, how does he come up with the evaluation?
Correct.
We feel like we valued it properly on the form and it got changed.
Yep.
No, and everything that you guys had brought to the table makes sense to me. Now it's where is the disconnect from?
Well, that again is, I think, on page 91 of the packet. Is kind of that commercial chart.
Yeah, but I just, how could it be that far off is my,
Right, well,
It-
because a mini storage building really is, kind of the most basic of buildings, and even if you use the utility building valuation, the U, which would be the kind of the next closest category to put it in, that's $57.53 a square foot, and what they're coming up with is about
right.
between $20 and $23 a square foot constructed cost.
But I mean, with his high value, if he's putting in the wrong materials, that affects the value.
Right,
So that's my
Yeah.
question, how can that happen when, can't you just go out and look at the materials and go off of that? I mean, I guess I'm confused on that part.
That again is statute and whether or not the official changes that valuation. I think one of the things that would, in my mind, come out of this, if there is any change from the customer's valuation on the permit application, if there's a change that the inspector is recommending, I think that should be communicated directly to the customer and
Absolutely.
why.
Absolutely.
So that you don't get to a point where you say, I don't know why all of a sudden you're charging me more for this. And so that's something that we'll have to do internally to fix that. You've kind of exposed this to our eyes.
Mr. Mayor, just so everybody's on the same page, I think what we're looking to do is have them not only go back to the customer regarding the changes, but to provide something to City Hall, so Jennifer and staff understands where the difference is and where there may be discrepancies.
One of the things is we feel like we have a fair amount of experience now in building in a lot of jurisdictions as well.
Right. Well, in some, I'm sure you only pay a zoning permit fee rather than even a building permit fee or
We pay a lot more fees here.
Yeah.
But we have chosen to build here, but this does bring up a huge question. Should we be building here?
of course.
Do I have to look at every piece of paper that goes through the office? And I thought we had a master plan,
Right.
and we don't.
To me, in the future, I think owner brings an evaluation, Dan Murphy brings an evaluation, and if it's that far apart before we get too far, that's where we start to make the
Right.
changes, not not after the fact.
So then I guess at this point, if the council is comfortable, what we would like to do then is continue to move forward. Now, I know that there's been some research done of past permits just to see if we were to utilize that. Now, one of the things, I think you did the initial site work pad all at once at the beginning. So if we were to value each individual building, there should be a sliver of that site cost, in each building then as well.
But if I'm correct, we also paid for that on the.
Yeah, that would be what we'd have to, dig into, right? So it becomes difficult then to, come up with where is our true valuation of the building if we've eliminated a part of the site package in that as well. So I guess what I'd like to do and propose is we put together, and I know you've got some information in here, Jennifer, about the past permits that Dan looked at, but I don't know if we have a specific, if there's refund due, what that is. And as Chris said, if we do something like this, does it set a precedent for something else? And, I guess for me, I'd like to be fair and open and, right, and,
We're not looking for special treatment or.
Mayor, separate from the fee schedule though too, I was reading that, and I think we did have a code change where everything has to be, signed off by an architect and engineer. Do we have that in this plan, or does that not matter because everything started before that, or, codes do change even over time, so I would assume we need a new plan with that stamped then, or do we not?
All of our buildings come stamped. We do submit stamped plans by an engineer. That's part of the fee for the building.
Okay, so what he said that there is a code violation is incorrect then? Or there is not, because, Dan said however there's a code violation, we will require new plans stamped and signed by an architect and engineer. So do we have those, or you guys have them and just didn't submit them?
I have submitted everyone that they've asked for. The last building, I know she said, the office said that whenever there's a master plan, they're all the same, so you don't have to hand in I have them at home, I can
Yeah.
bring in one for every building.
And when we met and talked to Dan about that, we said, we'll bring it in. Oh, you don't need to. It's just a little thing. So we offered to, and then he said, no, you don't need it.
I do have to have
We do have
to have those drawings.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I remember we talked about it with the Doodles place, what they had to do, so that was my only question, I guess.
They got in the master plan, they said the last one or two I didn't have to because they were all the same.
Okay.
Different sizes, but the same.
But each building as it's built, ordered, is engineered and stamped
Yes.
with
Yeah, Tractese engineers will provide that, right?
up to date, whatever the code changes,
Like 5 copies, so.
they keep up with it, we do get stamped, engineered prints
Okay.
with each one.
Jennifer, you've got the master plan there that
Well, this is the site plan, but it ties into when we talk about that similar plan because it, there's 40 by 150 buildings or 50 by 150. And so that's where Dan is saying if there's a similar, if we're dealing with permits with different size buildings, that's where the similar plan fee doesn't apply. And so that's why if anybody wants to look at this, you can see, and then if you follow that I think is what Dan is referencing. I don't want to speak on his behalf, and I was under the impression Dan was going to be at tonight's meeting, so I'm sorry he's not here. I talked to him this afternoon, and so I'm not sure what happened.
We would agree with that, that's what Dan said, that each size is a different one, and we thought the master plan was our site plan, and so site plan doesn't have anything to do with it, we didn't know that, didn't
And
understand
that's
that.
when we started with Brad, we gave him our master layout of 12 buildings or so, and he said, I'm just gonna start this master plan for you because they're all the same. Same structure, he never mentioned anything that the size would change. It shows that our sizes would change there, we have them all, we stuck exactly to the square footage of each building individually.
How many different building sizes are on that site? Because that's where you started in 2016.
And we've stuck to exactly the same footage, 40 feet in between the buildings, exactly to this, so when we build them to our original
Site plan
site plan or layout, which we thought that
was the master plan.
Right.
Brad never said anything different, and we didn't understand that the site plan is totally different from the master plan, or whatever.
Well, I'd have to look back too at that initial permit, because you had most of this site work in that initial permit, right? The whole pad.
Drainage, there was quite a bit of drainage and ponds and retaining walls.
And I think you asked, Mayor, about the apparent overcharges after, and I apologize, I didn't answer that question, but according to Dan's calculations, which start on page 86, it looks like permit number 16-21, it looks, according to using that $28 per square foot calculation, or the 1994 UBC fee schedule, that the city would owe the Schneps $367.50.
And we've never really agreed with the $28, that was the fee that they come up with, and Dan came up with. We're not in agreement with that at all, they've never cost that.
There was a 266 one also, and an 866 one.
Yes, that's correct. That's under the scenario of using that $21.66 square foot. So Dan also is a little bit confusing when you look at it. On the top, he put using the $28 per square foot, and then on the bottom, he shows the calculation if you use the 21.66 per square foot. And then on some of them, according to his calculations, and he admits to some errors in here, it shows that the Schneps were undercharged. Obviously, as I mentioned to them in the meeting, I cannot see where the city in good faith would go back on anything if the city made a mistake or its contractor. So, I believe that one permit is the only one where it looks as if there would be a credit owed if the council decided to go that route.
And I can't say it's a major concern of ours, what we paid in the past, we could really be done with that, but it would be nice to use some logic and common sense in moving forward, honestly.
Thoughts from the council? I think, Anthony, you've kind of expressed your opinion. Again, I think, I know Kathy, when you had called me, that was my concern. I wanted to see what some of the bills were, just to, see where that valuation came from. You've proved all of that with the information, and I think that's probably where we need to go to move forward. And if that's a plan, I don't see that there's any problem from my point, so I don't know if the rest of the council would have any concern using valuation based upon the information provided by the Schneps for the construction.
I think my concern is going forward, how do we replicate this, so we're on the same page with others as they come in, it's a big departure from where we're at, how do we, it's just such a discrepancy of that cost and the evaluation. Unfortunately, more familiar with going in and get your car's radiator changed at the dealer, and there's a book cost, and whether it's, takes them an hour, but the book is 4 hours, that's what the cost is. So how do you reconcile the difference of our process and what isn't our process?
I think we're gonna be going more forward with the new process and trying to figure those things out. In this particular case, I think you can look at this as being kind of a one-off with the Schneps. If we have somebody else that comes in and is making a similar request, at that point, I do think we need to put together a policy. And then we can discuss what that policy should be, but that would probably be at a work session with the council, so you'd have an idea. And some of it may be really be determined on how many issues there may or may not be. But at this point, I honestly don't know if this was a serious and misfortunate offense with one particular person, or if there's bigger issues with Mr. Murphy. I don't think so. He seems to be, I know he's got a good reputation, so, but that's how I would ask the council to view it at this point, not setting kind of precedent, but to see this as a one-time situation. And if we have to change that opinion later, we can.
Kathy, how many buildings do you have out there right now then? What number are you on?
We don't number them, it was hundreds and more, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 6, I believe.
And does that include the 2 on the outside? Okay. So I mean, what is your plan to do it, one a year still, or?
Depends on market demand. This year, we put one up and it got filled right away, there was a lot of demand.
Like in a month and a half, it was full. And
Because it just seems very easy to me to just say, okay, you have 6 buildings left, they're all the exact same size. I mean, if it's me, I'm recalling my last permit, making sure that cost didn't change and resubmitting it. So how do we avoid this frustration amongst all the parties going forward?
My concern is cost, right? I can bring you any cost I want.
Mhm.
And I could have a sweetheart deal on cost that doesn't really, cost and value, I'm not, it's.
I can tell you, I'm not bringing in the sweet.
No, I'm not saying you are. No,
No.
I don't have any problems with what you guys have done. It's just, that is potential.
Mhm.
And we have to guard against that as we move forward. Value and cost aren't, not necessarily locked together. Yeah, I agree. No, I agree.
Yeah, and I guess in my opinion, I don't know that anything that anyone did was, intentionally trying to, as you say, pad my pay or anything like that. Because we see things, all the time. We've never had any complaints about Dan's performance. And again, I think legally, from what Chris, you've mentioned, is that he was utilizing this chart, and I think there was just a disconnect on how that was communicated. So I guess I don't think anyone was intentionally trying to do anything, nefarious or incorrectly, but as we move forward, I don't want the council to do anything that would jeopardize us. As John said, somebody can bring a permit application for a sweetheart price and say, well, I got my cousin to build it for, such and such, whatever.
Well, I mean, I go back to eliminating that. It's, to me, pretty simple. The owner brings their price, Dan brings his price, and if they're way far apart, then that's when you start having conversations of, hey, this is why I got mine, this is why I got mine. I mean, to me, I don't think it's not, it's not rocket science. It's, you both bring valuations, and if they're close in number, then we okay it. If not, then we have further conversation.
The problem we've had with that is these charts here, we're not even on the chart, we're not even close to the chart. It's
Yeah.
so grossly off that,
And that's what I'm saying. I think a meeting before everything happens is going to eliminate that.
I can guarantee you they're real. We haven't had a sweetheart deal. Like Kelly said, we've paid extra for our concrete guy and our builder to buy quality and service.
No, but I mean, but
No,
to John's point, no, but exactly.
yeah, no, I think,
I get that you don't want to set a precedent either.
But what John's saying is, if you guys came and said no, it was $13 a square foot. Okay, well now we have a little bit of an issue. But the valuation that they brought to me is not a red flag saying they're trying to get a sweet deal.
no, and I don't wanna insinuate that or anything, it's just a common thing that, once we do this, it's almost to the point where, it becomes automatic as opposed to it's within our policy, everything's fair, and it doesn't always end up at, disgruntled,
The one thing we
residents, those kind of things, so.
didn't do is bring permits and valuations from other communities. They're all gonna be the same. Like I said, we know what we paid, we apply based on that.
They'll be the same, assuming that everybody's using the same code.
Dan does a lot of our,
Dan does inspections for the city of Waseca, we built numerous buildings there.
He would, but we'd be doing the same job, the calculation of the fees would be different based on which code it's
Right.
originally coded. Or he may have multiple versions of the code that he's got. I don't know, I honestly don't know what else.
Well, it looks like, kind of going through this, at some point from when you started till today, we as a council updated the code chart from the 1994 version of the building code prices to the 1997. So that was done kind of in the middle of your project here as well. If all of this data shows, it looks like we were using the 94 schedule for a while.
I don't know how much that chart changed or where we.
Yeah, we'd have to look at them and compare them. But again, it's gonna be on the valuation for every $10,000, it's $6.22 or whatever their, number is. So it probably doesn't change too drastically.
We're not really arguing the fees for the permit, we're arguing the valuation.
Right. Well, then path forward, is the council, comfortable again, if we can utilize what they've got for their costs moving forward, seems reasonable, as you say, Anthony. If something comes up in the future where somebody brings in a project and we're way off, we should have that conversation. But we know that you've got, another 6 or 8 buildings left to go on the master plan, and so let's work together to make those work appropriately. So then I guess, in my opinion, I'd move forward with the valuation that we have, and utilize the information that they've provided us for that valuation.
Is that your motion?
Sure, I'll make that a motion.
No,
Carrie, did you figure out what I just said?
I totally agree. I think, that's the way to move forward and make sure that we can do it properly and.
I think communication's key. Like, if you guys would've known up front that it was gonna change, or why it would change, or communication on that piece, this whole thing would've been avoided. So I just think if things on the permits change, or on either party's stance, it's discussed before final permit and money is issued.
No, and my, things should never change.
Right.
You know, once that comes in without discussion with the permit, you know, the person coming, so that's not what I have an issue with, is how we got to that number and why was it so different. But yeah, things should never just be scratched out and changed without the permit. The permit.
I was gonna build in here. I was looking for other property to build besides your city.
No,
Sorry, but is that concerning? And I thought that was taken advantage of.
Well, that's not our intent. So my motion then, I guess, would be to utilize the valuation based upon the construction cost that the Schneps have provided for us as valuation of these buildings, and utilize actual, material costs for the valuation. Now, Chris, I'd like to ask, is there anything legally inappropriate with that?
We're treating this as basically, I don't know if I turned it on or off. I turned it on, all right. No, I think we're basically treating this as a one-off situation. We'll try to address the other matters going forward with the building inspector, so that'd be fine. The only concern, as I point out, and I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Beth. Kind of point out is that there was an indication in one of the notes that there may be a violation here. We will have to address that at some point with Mr. Murphy. I don't expect that it's a big one or anything of that nature, and it certainly sounds like he's already talked to you about it, but, that'd be the only concern.
Okay.
So that you go forward and address that, he just may have other issues that have to be addressed based on the building code.
All right. So we have a motion on the table. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor would say aye.
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 Any opposed? And that carries.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Well, thank you for going through the process, and we do apologize for any mistakes made on our end, and as we say, we just want to.
I'd like to apologize again to Jennifer. She took some heat. Part of the job.
That's why she gets the big bucks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Have a good night.
All right, then we'll move on. Our next presentation, Luke Israelson from KJ Walk is here to discuss moving forward building permits.
Yes. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the council. I'm Luke Israelson with KJ Walk, the developer for Eagle Ridge Second on 598. So just here to see, had conversations with Jennifer about getting building permits out there. I've got several builders and a couple homeowners that are anxious to get building on their new homes out there. So trying to see if we've done everything necessary to proceed with building permits on the development.
Mayor and City Council, I apologize. I don't know why the scan came in crooked here, so hopefully in your packets it's straight and you can read it. But I'll just kind of, if it's okay, Luke, I'll just give them a little rundown kind of what we were emailing back and forth with items that are completed and some are outstanding. And Brian Sarvis here, and he can also add input as well. We had talked about sidewalks and whether or not they would be done in 2021 or 2022, and I think the consensus of all parties is it would be best to do it in 2022. Stormwater pond, the calculations were received from KJ Walk on, I believe it was October 18th. Then they went to Bolton and Mink, and they believe they're currently still under review. Boulevards restoration would be needed after sidewalk construction next year. Final wear course, we discussed it'd be best to have it next year with appropriate temperatures. And then there's some items on the list here showing as being complete. And then there's a misaligned valve box, which would also be addressed in 2022. So minus the stormwater pond, there's four items that'd be addressed in 2022. And what we wanted to talk about with the council this evening is we At City Hall, continue to receive many inquiries from interested parties in wanting to pull a permit, and discussion previously was that no permits could be pulled until all final punch list items are completed. And I also included a copy of the developer's agreement and thought we could talk about this evening if there's any way there be anything required of the developer to satisfy the city's concern with items being outstanding in 2022 to keep the process moving along, since our lot inventory is running low, and there's be a number of lots in the subdivision that would become available. So, I don't know, Brian Surf, if you have anything you want to add with the stormwater pond at this time, or?
Yeah, and I think, kind of in the past, some of those outstanding developers agreement items, you know, where the biggest concern was, I think, that pond. There was some utilities, I think, that had been addressed early on this summer, so those were kind of checked off the list. But in my opinion, that pond was kind of that last remaining bit. You know, some of the others, you know, such as sidewalks and, you know, some of the repairs to various things happening in 2022, I think is appropriate for our construction. You know, I'd certainly like to see houses under construction and then, you know, redoing or finalizing our pavement at that time as we get some of that going, rather than tear up new blacktop and things like that. So I guess from my perspective, if Brian is comfortable with the stormwater pond calculations, I don't see anything on this list that would make me concerned about moving forward. I'd love to see some houses under construction. We've kind of lost the end of our season here, so I would imagine, I don't know how many lots you've got sold out there already, or?
Well, everybody's kind of waiting until they know for sure that they
Make
can
the
get
final-
building permits. But,
Okay.
you know, I've got a couple builders that are both looking at about 5 lots apiece.
Nice.
That they want to, you know, get at least one spec going right away, try to have something for the spring parade. And so I got a couple individuals that are looking to get started still this fall if possible, so.
Mr. Mayor, if I may interject just real quickly, because I have to leave here for another
Okay.
meeting. One of the things that the council can consider when you're looking at this is whether or not you want to have something such as an irrevocable letter of trust, or have money put outside to make certain that the repairs and the other punch list items are completed. If they're not, there's funds that are going to be available that can be addressed for that. I'm not saying you need to do that, but that is an option that the council would have if you have some concerns about that kind of going forward. Obviously, Brian, with Bolton and Mack will have a better idea what those kind of costs and stuff would be, and I don't know how much that would affect the developer or something of that nature, but there is that option that's kind of in between, that allows things to go forward, but it will increase most likely some of the costs for the developer in the project, just to get that information, unless they have a bank that's ready to indicate to them that they have a line of credit that they can attach for those purposes. But it would ensure that the project gets done and gets completed. The other concern that they always have, particularly when we're talking about sidewalks, is just making sure that if the sidewalks are not put in place and they're not marked for the properties, that whoever's coming in and buying the properties is very well aware that there's going to be a sidewalk that they're going to be responsible for. As silly as that may sound, that's where I've seen issues come up in the past. So.
Right. Jennifer, do you know, I mean, from the developer's agreement, there was a deposit, certified check, or irrevocable letter of credit on the project? Is there
I don't
anything on
believe it was
file?
ever, no. When I came in, I know there had been, the interim administrator, Rick Olmec, they had talked about doing that for the final wear course on 598th, but that was what that was in the amount of. It wasn't actually provided, but that was at Exhibit C, but that's over and done with now. I think that was valued at like $66,000 or something at the time. So we've never had anything on file.
Yeah, because it looks like under building permit, item number 4 is where I see that language in the developer's agreement. And so basically what Chris was saying is that we'd have to evaluate any of the outstanding items and put together a list. And then would you be willing to provide a letter of credit for those remaining items. I think it's pretty typical. I don't know that we didn't have something at some point.
Yeah, I mean, this is an unusual situation, being that the development's outstanding from 15 years ago and kind of a continuation of something that was started back then. I know there was a period where we had done a cash escrow when we were trying to get kind of the first half of the second edition completed and permits on that. And so we had completed a bunch of tasks similar to what we're dealing with now. Similar situation, finishing some ponds and streets and those items. Letters of credit are pretty typical, and I don't think we'd have an opposition to doing that. Or perhaps a cash escrow would be another option, provided it comes with some guarantees that we're gonna get permits issued soon. 'Cause we put a lot of work into it, and I know it's drug out a little bit. This year we tried to throw as much resources as we could at it. With the labor shortages and everything, it's been challenging. We had everything done, and Small Utilities took 2.5 months to show up and get their stuff done. And then actually I was out there personally with one of my guys working on a lot of the button-up stuff on the punch list. So we're trying to get it wrapped up. So if that's what it takes, I think we're open to that. If we can come up with a reasonable number, and then a reasonably quick timeline on getting permits issued.
Right.
Building permits.
Thoughts or concerns from the council?
I think one is making sure that the stormwater pond is obviously, that's a go, no-go, right? And the other one is, a year or so after I moved in, we were hit with an evaluation for the last lift, and we weren't because of some other defaults and other things happened. So having an escrow account, I think, is some type of account letter of credit or a cash escrow account to be able to make sure that happens. And it doesn't get passed on to the homeowners as certain things happen. I think for those two things.
Something else, can I interrupt here? Just a quick question. I know Brian, Public Works Director, is probably wondering about snow removal, and I think if I read through, because you were mentioning, Luke, you want to get a spec home up yet this fall. Is that what you're?
Well, I mean, not me, but I know there's builders that are gung-ho to get something going, and I don't know, I mean, maybe at this point it's too late, I guess, I don't know. But there's definitely the potential for a spec home to go. I know for sure there's one individual that, if he could, he would start digging the basement tomorrow, so.
Well, I was just reading the contract as we're sitting here, and I think, as I understand it here on that page 6 of 9, I don't believe the city would be responsible for snow removal until all items have been completed, if I'm reading number 3 under building permit, correct? But I think that is something we probably just want to clarify. If a home would go up, that, whether or not the city's required to provide snow removal. And the way I read it, I don't believe we would be until the city's accepted all infrastructure.
And do we have to have a formal acceptance of infrastructure resolution or something like that? I don't know. Again, we're kind of in a different situation as this thing is kind of come around. Is that something that you've seen, Brian? That
I can't say that I've seen it, but it certainly sounds like an appropriate thing to do.
I think the list, we had the one valve that, is on the repair schedule for next year. A couple things that were completed on the catch basin grates, and then that pond, I think are the only pieces that we would need to, everything else done for a while now. Anything else that you can think of as far as items that are outstanding? So then if we move forward, we'd need to figure out the cost of any remaining improvements. work with Luke then to get a letter of credit for that, or however you'd want to address that. You know, there were a number of methods, you say cash escrow or something like that.
Yeah, in our experience, a letter of credit with a bank's gonna take some time, as they have to draft the documents and your attorney would have to approve it and everything.
Right.
So we've been able to expedite the process in the past by just basically cutting a check with a really basic agreement to the city saying, here's cash that you guys hang on to until we complete the tasks,
Yep.
and then we get the cash back.
That's an acceptable method as well. I know we've used that in other locations, so. So then, action that we would need to take then today is to approve the issuance of permits as they come through. I don't know how the legal action is for that. Open the floodgates, say yes, let's get things going.
Jennifer, when someone submits a permit, building permit for it, how long does it take for them to get it back? What's the typical turnaround for that?
So when a permit first comes in, we'll get the site plan and in the front office, I'll make sure all the required information is the plans. I review the site plan for zoning, and then it goes off to Dan Murphy for building code review, and he's pretty quick. So, and then we have to schedule staking inspection, and pending there's no issues with the site plan and zoning code, it can go pretty reasonably quick, I would say, couple
So if they have it
days.
staked out already, it could go a couple days and they have permit in hand.
It's
at
possible.
most. Okay. Just wondering if we were talking a couple days or a couple weeks, I guess is all I was wondering.
Just out of curiosity, how many, so you have a couple builders that are wanting to put 5 homes up or so, did you say?
Yeah, I know I have 2 builders for sure that both have 5 home sites reserved, and they're gonna start with specs, I believe. And then we have several homeowners that wanna purchase lots, and at least one that I know of that's looking to start immediately. I kind of wear a lot of different hats, so I'm not intimately involved with those, don't have those things memorized, but I know in the office we could probably figure out a number in terms of what we have for quote-unquote reservations, but I would say it's probably in the low teens at a minimum.
Brian, how long do you think it would take to do the final review on stormwater design? So if we were to move forward, knowing that we're working on cost for outstanding items to complete in '22, and we can come up with our letter of credit or escrow or whatever that looks like, could we have people concurrently requesting building permits, filling out the applications and doing all that while we're kind of finishing up on the legal touch-ups? So if somebody wanted to potentially get a spec home up this year or get started, that we could get the application and everything in process, and by the time we'd have permit in hand, maybe we'd be to a point where everything would be finalized on that end? Is that something that would be,
That would be great, yeah.
because I think it looks like it's ready. We just need to get some houses underway down there, so.
Yes, that would be excellent to get some houses in over there, so.
So I don't know how to put that into a motion. Is a motion required?
I think if possible, Mayor, I think a motion would be good, since at the last time it was discussed at a council meeting, there was, I don't know if it was a motion, I guess it's in here. There's just no interest until all punch list items were completed, but I don't think it would hurt the city to just have an emotion that you're requiring either cash escrow or an irrevocable letter of credit, for the cost of the outstanding improvements, and make a notation about the stormwater pond as well. Those calcs are being reviewed, and should have a response on that shortly. That'd be my recommendation from staff.
All right, well then, I will make a motion then to proceed with the final stormwater calculations, develop a cost for outstanding items to be completed in 2022, as per our schedule here in page 95 of the packet, and work with Luke to get escrow or letter of credit for those items, allowing then the ability to issue building permits on those properties. Carrie, you got all that? So motion on the table, is there a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
The only thing I would say is reiterating what was said earlier, with just making sure that when they pull the permits, that they know that there's a potential sidewalk. Because I know in Eagle Heights subdivision, it was not known, so when the sidewalk got put in, there was a lot of very angry residents of those homes.
Can I interrupt? That's a great
I don't know
point.
where that goes, if it's with them or where it's at, but I do know that was a piece.
That's a great point, Beth, and we will, I know you guys had asked about that before. If any permits would ever be issued, we would have something attached, explain that, and we'll put something together.
Okay.
Good point.
Just so it doesn't come back and then we, more angry residents that didn't know.
All right.
Yeah, the grading permit that we provide to the builders and everything shows the sidewalks on there, so
Okay,
they should be aware of
perfect.
where they're at. And then when you do the site plan review, I'm sure you can note whether or not the sidewalk is shown on those or not. And then as far as the cost estimate goes, typically, we would prepare that and then Brian would just review it. So I'll get a cost estimate put together and send it over to Brian for his review. If that works. Okay.
All right, any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? And that carries. Well, very good. Thanks for coming, Luke. We're excited to see this next step. What are we down to, maybe 15 lots in town or something like that? So, what did we have, 56, 54, something?
Better than 50. That's all I can remember off the top of my head.
So
Thank you very much.
That's
I
excellent.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep,
Thank
have a
you,
good
Luke.
night.
You've been very good to work with. Appreciate it.
Mike is not here. So Brian, you're up. Our next presentation is Brian Sarf to give us an update on the County State Aid Highway 27 or Agency Street project. And then you want to talk just a little bit about water regionalization?
Yes. Thank you for having me, Mayor and City Council, tonight. First, let's go through the Agency Street project. So we are at what we'd call substantial completion on that. As you guys are likely aware, we've got the initial lifts of blacktop down, sidewalks and all the concrete in. Boulevards have been prepared, signs are erected, and we're open to traffic. So what we would expect next year is the contractor will be back. We've already got a few punch list items, some minor concrete fixes and that sort of thing. So they'll be back to repair those. We'll see how the grass fares this summer, or this winter, excuse me. And there might be some touch-up required on that. And then finally, once the temperatures are a little warmer, we'll get the final lift of blacktop down. So that's really where we are with that project. Is there any questions regarding the Agency Street project?
Just happy it's open.
I think it looks great.
Yeah, it looks really nice.
Yeah.
It looks really good.
It is surprising how narrow the road is, though, from what we're used to. You know, what did it come down? How much?
Just 4 feet.
4 feet, but it is a little bit more narrow than what it was.
Yep.
The
Yeah, hopefully
sidewalk
that's a
looks
good
really
thing.
good. Yeah, it looks
Yep.
really good, though.
Yep. Hopefully that will encourage a little bit slower traffic going through there. So. Very
I
good.
don't have any questions.
No.
Okay. My colleague John Groutman, who's been working on the water study for the city, could not be here tonight, but just wanted to give you an update on where we're at. We did have a meeting with Mankato city staff, with Eagle Lake staff, to kind of talk about where we are at in terms of a regionalization option where, you know, Eagle Lake or Mankato would come together with a pipe between the two cities. So in those discussions, Mankato has concerns about water quality. You are likely very aware of the water quality issues that have the complaints, I guess I would say, that have come up, and there is some concern about that. From an engineering standpoint, we are not concerned about cross-contamination in a regionalization option. There are ways to deal with that. We're just not exactly sure what it would take at this point to satisfy the city of Mankato to make sure that that wouldn't be an issue. Mankato also has concerns about capacity. Their existing plant site is pretty well built out. Their space is maximized. In other words, they don't have room to easily expand. Recent drought conditions in this last year have really highlighted their capacity, their perceived capacity issues. Capacity is a genuine concern for both Mankato and Eagle Lake. Mankato's discomfort really makes the regionalization option much more challenging. It is clear from our discussions with Mankato that pursuing this further, if the council wanted to do that, would start to require some financial reimbursement to the city for the time that they're spending, is what they've made clear to us. They've had a consultant prepare a proposal to do a water study in the event that Eagle Lake wanted to pursue this option, and they'd be looking for certainly a cost share from the city if that were the way Eagle Lake wanted to go. This type potential where multiple city buildings might be a wise thing to consider in this phase. Fitting a water treatment plant or other city building would be really challenging in a developed area. So that's why, you know, that piece of a plant option is certainly critical. After a site is picked, really you'd be looking to pursue a preliminary design on a plant if that's the way the city wanted to go. Funding for water treatment is likely available in 2023, but historically it's been annually available. And with the new manganese thresholds, we're thinking that the city of Eagle Lake is going to be more competitive this round for funding. In terms of funding being shovel ready, and that's where that preliminary design kind of comes into play, is really important for most grant programs and likely important for federal infrastructure spending, which, you know, is still an unknown at this point, but certainly it's appears to be on the horizon. Many projects are delayed for a couple years after design, waiting to kind of rise on the priority list. Just to kind of give you an example of the timeline. Typically, I guess in terms of timeline, again, you're looking to submit final plans, and if you were to submit it in 23, for example, you'd have to submit that in March of 23 to get funding for that year. So again, I'm not have as much expertise as my colleague John, but if needed, we can certainly invite John to the next December meeting, and he can answer any certainly the more technical questions with regard to either regionalization or water treatment. That's really what I have on that topic. Is there any questions that I can answer?
It was like a heck of a process. Once you submit an application, do you kind of stay on the list, or do you have to continually resubmit it?
It's not a continual resubmission, I don't believe. There's probably a certain time limit on it, but I believe the city's on it as we speak. Yep.
In another city I worked when we got on the intended use plan list, we had to notify them to take us off the list. We just kept staying on there, and then we would be ranked different each round. So I think we would just stay on it continuously until we decide either we're gonna do it or not gonna do it. It's my understanding.
But then one of our next steps, as Brian said, would be to look at land acquisition to find the proper location for a filtration plant, and then get some design going to have that ready. If we did get some funding awarded to us, then we can start construction then at that point. Yeah, I was kind of disappointed that it didn't seem like regionalization was of interest to the city of Mankato. But if they've got concerns on capacity, it sounds like reading some of John's information about our well capacity, now would be the time to bring a new well online as well.
Correct.
Um, But I think as a council, we need to kind of keep acting, keep moving this forward, because it will be a process to go through. Unfortunately, now we're looking at the most expensive option rather than the most economical option. So that was kind of where I was going last month, with the whatever they call it, Recovery Act dollars. I thought I had read somewhere that water systems and design of water systems for a community was an appropriate use of that funding. Therefore we could start in on some of the design work, using those funds to get a BMI or somebody going on a design for a filtration plant, have that in hand, and then find the most proper location for that. Initially, I think John's discussion was out here on 598th, kind of the LeSueur Avenue extension, I thought was where he was starting, so.
Yep, that's certainly one location that he was considering.
Well, Mayor and City Council, I can do some further research on what you just mentioned, Mayor, about the design work to see if that's something that would be eligible, just to confirm that. And, I think it wouldn't hurt to have John come to the next council meeting, if the council be okay, and just kind of really cement those next steps, like the mayor said, just to keep this on the forefront and keep moving forward.
So your sense was regionalization is probably not in the cards?
This time.
From the responses that were given, and Jennifer, was that your take as well?
Absolutely. I didn't feel like it was a real viable option, and they cited they had two legitimate reasons. The cross-contamination, although we might argue that we might have some solutions to address that issue, and then capacity, which is hard to argue with. So yeah, that was my takeaway as well.
Well, I know just in some of the conversations early on, in the water study, some residents were very opposed to a regionalization concept anyway. They wanted to remain independent, and, so if we took it to the public, we'd probably get a 50-50 split amongst the the population. Until you said, well, here's the new water bill every month, then that might change somebody's opinion. But I do think we should move forward, and if we, get John here, I'd like to kind of lay out a long-term plan if we can, if we're gonna go down the road of building a filtration plant, which I think is needed. And then, as you say, some of the manganese requirements are becoming a little bit more strict.
Correct.
It'd be nice to have this done and put to bed behind us. So, then we could, Jennifer, probably start looking at funding options, as far as paying that back, what we've got for expiring bonds and things. We can kind of see what the, next 3 to 5 years looks like in setting things up, so.
Do we have a timeline where we have to be? Like, within the next 3 years, we have to be there, have a filtration plant and well, or another, is there, or is it?
I don't know if they give us
Probably a
that.
great question for John in terms of the manganese. I'm not sure that there is. I want to say that there's nothing really concrete at this point.
Sounds like there's some incremental steps we could and should be taking to kind of move down that.
Right.
anyway, so.
All right, well, if we can continue to move forward, Jennifer, if you can gather up some information about use of funds, if John can come to our next meeting and maybe we can start laying out a preliminary timeline, what this might look like, the steps that we need to take as a council, to move through the process. And then we can start looking at checking off the boxes as we move forward. Anything else for Brian?
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. We'll move on to new business then. The first item on page 109 of your packet is the Planning Commission recommendation for 237 Oak Drive. Jennifer, if you want to give us just a little background there.
My page number's wrong here. I pulled this up. Okay, sorry about that. All right, Mark Fromm, the owner of 237 Oak Drive, recently submitted an application for the construction of a new detached garage. So when I received his permit, I did a zoning review against code and was concerned when I looked at the site plan showing hard surface that appeared to be more than 40 feet at the garage line. And so I shared that concern with Mark and his contractor, and then they requested a meeting on site. So I went on site and met with them, and I had Brian, Public Works Director, come with me. And I was made aware that it had already been poured. So next in my memo here, I kind of gave you a little background, and I'll just try to kind of go through that here quickly because I think it is important. The building permit was pulled for the new home construction back in 2017. And included on the building plans was a driveway with a measurement of approximately 40 feet in width at the garage line. And then in the spring of 2018, the property owner had come to the city and asked about the driveway width at curb. At that time, it was, I believe, 24 feet, and he had wanted to see that increase. So it went to the Planning Commission. There was a public hearing, and a couple things came up at the Planning Commission meeting. One was to increase the width to 32 feet at curb, and then the other issue was to talk about allowing up to 35% of a front yard to be hard surface, taking away that 40-foot width maximum at the garage line, take that out. So that was a recommendation, went to the council tabled taking any action. until staff did some more research, and then it came back a couple of meetings later, and then the ultimate outcome was just to increase the width at curb from 24 feet to 32 feet, and then leave the language alone as far as the maximum 40 feet wide at the garage line. So that's where, I think that's kind of important to know, that it was kind of spanned over basically the course of the summer between the Planning Commission and City Council meetings before that change was final. We did talk about this at the October 18th Planning Commission meeting. I've attached those minutes to the information in the packet. There was some concern expressed by the Planning Commission about the permit application and there being a violation of code with the hard surface in excess of what's allowed by code. And so the consensus of the Planning Commission was to send it on to the City Council to review and kind of determine what the next steps are here, and if a permit could even be approved for a property that has something that we now are aware of is non-compliant. So, and then the other thing we talked about, and I mentioned to Mark that a concern was with his lot, and then in the packet too, you'll see there's a drawing. He does not have your typical rectangular shaped lot. He's got a very odd shaped lot, so it isn't glaringly obvious to someone exactly what is the front, side, rear until you really look at it. And so after talking to Mark, I said, you know, this is kind of where I would perceive your side yards to be your front yard and your rear yard. And the Planning Commission had concerns with allowing a detached garage in the side yard. So that's kind of, where do we go from here? I guess that's our next step, in that we know that there is, you know, a violation with code and whether it needs to be removed. Can we issue any more permits for the property until it's addressed? I guess that's the challenge here tonight, to talk about where do we go from here.
Are there any questions from the council?
So what's currently there, the pad in front of the garage and the side and this driveway in green?
Yes, so I'm gonna pull that up. Let me grab that page number here. I'll try to get
And the side in
it.
green is the non-permitted, or
Let's
non-conforming.
see. Yes, I'm gonna, just gonna scroll down here. I should be able to pull it up. Okay, this will probably help maybe a little bit more. So right here, there's this at the garage line where I have 39 feet. So code, the max is 40, so then right now everything in green is already there. And when I reviewed the site plan, I didn't think it was there yet, and so then when I went on site, I was like, oh, it's already here. Okay, now you know, this part right here is in excess, and I don't remember exactly. I guess so it'd be 56, and looks like it's 16 feet.
Jennifer, I just sent you a photo to your email. I don't know if you can put
Okay.
that on the screen, or?
Yep, just one moment.
And then you can see visually the additional concrete. So I talked with Mr. Fromm, and I think he's probably just gonna withdraw his request to add the garage. He's still thinking about, you know, other things. Maybe he could expand even attached to the garage rather than having a detached garage. We haven't gotten anything from him on that, but I did drive by there today just to show you. So the non-conforming bit is the additional concrete that's over and above the width of the driveway. And I know back in what you had referred to in 2017 or 2018, the council had discussed whether some of that should be modified code language, because it was kind of vague, and what was determined was just to change the curb opening from 24 feet to 32 feet and not discuss any further the width of driveway at the garage. And so what Mr. Fromm has is a 3-stall garage with a side patio on it. Does that come up at all, or?
Not yet. Let's see. I don't have it yet.
And so the recourse in the code would be for him to remove the side patio, would be one option. A second option would be to get a variance after the fact. I don't know that that's how we'd want to approach this. Or look at additional code modifications to allow for situations like this. I believe that we have had some variances to allow parking pads along the drive or along the garage on the side yard.
Yes, we recently, I looked back, the one that came to mind was Cranberry Court. They had encroached on they got a variance because you have to have that 8-foot required side yard, and they were, I think, 5 feet. Maybe there's only a separation of 5 feet, I believe. That was what it, so they hadn't met the side yard requirement, but.
Yeah, and in this particular property on Oak, you've got 50 feet or better.
Jennifer, it's on Beacon too, if you wanna open up Beacon. If that works. Cause they do have it's a weird lot.
Yeah.
I just worry based on, and I'm, just based on how big it is, if it's back in that corner, it does get really closer to the property line, and then is it a garage that he's gonna then drive all the way, essentially drive to the back, or a side lot? But he's got a lot of side yard because of the shape of it still.
So you can see the parking pad there on kind of the northwest side of the garage there. So the way that the code reads currently is that you can have 40 feet of distance. And I didn't bring a tape measure out there or anything to see what that was, but I would suspect it's probably 55, 56 feet.
Exactly.
Something like that. And so Mr. Fromm wants to know, okay, he was under the assumption that what he had installed met the code. That's not how the code spells it out. How do we want to proceed with a situation where now we've discovered a nonconformity? Typically, there's another instance of another nonconformity that's later on the agenda. The recourse would be to remove the nonconformity, asking him to remove that concrete parking slab. Is that what we want to do, or is there another way to come to resolution on this? And so I don't know if we put the question back to the Planning Commission to see if these types of parking pads are something we want to allow in the city. I know we could probably drive around and find a number of them, and I think maybe Mr. Fromm did that when he brought that in a couple years ago and said, well, here's other people that have a similar situation.
Yep, he did that with the driveway at curb, exactly.
Right. And so I just don't know how many side parking pads we have, and is that something that's out of the character of the neighborhood? How do we want to deal with that as a council?
Usually when I see the side pad, it's because they have 2-car garage and not a 3-car.
Right. Well, and
How many garages are allowable?
that's the next question that comes up. That's a great question, because I do believe Mark did mention that, well, what if I just added on to my garage? Well, he's already got a 3-stall garage, so, where do you draw the line?
And I don't know if the code has any, you're seeing garages that are auto garages plus a larger RV garage with a taller roof line and everything like that. What is it that we want the community to look like? And I don't know that we can answer that today. So as I was thinking through this situation, I thought maybe it would be a good exercise for the Planning Commission to discuss, what it is that we want this to look like. and see if there are modifications to the code. That still doesn't make this a non-conforming use. We still have that issue to address. You know, I could see lots of ways to make this, you know, find loopholes in the code. So if you just had 40 feet of concrete and then you cut a little chunk out and now it's a break in the concrete. Now I meet the code. I mean, there's ways around, you know, with these kind of loophole things. So I just want to make sure that we have kind of a conversation as a council. And maybe we do that with the planning commission to say, what do we want this to look like in the community? I think that's the purpose of what we've got in our code. And, you know, that changes over time, what's acceptable, what we like to see. Your thoughts? I guess that's kind of where I was going with it. I still don't have an answer to fixing this,
Yeah.
though.
And I think in Mr. Fromm's case, his lot is unique in the sense that you look at the lot, you know, directly north of it, and you could almost put two houses in his one lot, because of the shape of it. So I think it's unique in the sense that, yes, he added that extra concrete pad, 15 feet, that shouldn't have been added per code, but he still has a substantial amount of grass on that side. That doesn't seem like it's only a 5 foot between the houses now and stuff. That doesn't take away the fact that he still should have got at least a variance before putting it in. And I think putting a 4th stall in the city limits seems extreme. But I think that could go back to planning commission. I don't know that going to him and saying, hey, you need to rip this pad out because you didn't get a permit is necessarily the action needing to be taken, especially with the amount of green space he still has. It's kind of it's weird, but I don't want to seem like, okay, we didn't do anything to it, now other people are gonna build and then ask for forgiveness later type of thing. So it's a unique situation.
Yep, and I think that's kind of some of the legal opinions that we're looking at too. Now that we've discovered a non-conforming use, now we need to act. You know, if, I know we've had some legal issues in the past where maybe a sidewalk was heaved. Once we found out about it, now it becomes our liability and time to act, you know, to repair that. Here's the same situation. We need to come up with some sort of solution to resolve this issue, but, you know, moving forward, is this an acceptable use in the city? And then I think also the question, how many garages?
Right.
I don't know that we have any 4-stall garages in town, but I could see, you know, permits showing up to say, well, I've got a lot of things that I'd like to put in a garage, so, you know, my house is gonna have a 4-stall garage. You know, is that something that we need to regulate, or is that acceptable? And I haven't looked at the code to see what it says about
I'm glad you're,
stalls or.
no, I'm glad you're bringing that because Mark did ask me that question. And as from a staff perspective, I would like to do some research into this because when I did just a real quick review after he asked me about that, like, well, the only thing that would not allow that 4th is that 40-foot max at the garage line. Otherwise, I didn't see anything that would state he would not be allowed to have a 4-stall garage. So I think the mayors and all of you have said, I do think more research is needed here and to see what other cities allow. Maybe our code needs to be changed, and he does have an odd-shaped lot. Most lots would not be able to do something like this. Like John was saying, most situations you'll see the 2-stall garage and then a parking pad, and they're still within that 40 feet. So, and maintain their side yard setback. This is definitely an odd one.
We do have a past council member that does have a 4-stall garage currently, and in that, where that 4th stall addition is, the 3rd and 4th stall, it used to be a concrete slab for storage and a kind of a basketball hoop. And it looks, in the way that he has it done, it's really nice. And you know, so you know, that would be another one to look at. I think as long as it looks architecturally pleasing, I don't see a problem with having a 4th stall garage. But I see the situation that we're in now though with this up here.
I do like the idea of having a certain percentage of grass, and that may help us with these odd-shaped lots, being able to say, what that is. Having the entire front yard or in pavement would not be a good place to be, but, yeah, I think there's some tastefully done four-car garages. Would I love to have a four-car garage? Yes, because I've got too much stuff for a three-car. But I think, having that, being able to look like it fits instead of in the neighborhood as opposed to doesn't fit in the neighborhood is, but yeah, going back to the zoning commission and seeing what's, hopefully as we grow, we're gonna have instances where the lots are bigger, so
Right.
gonna be more opportunities for potentially larger garages or things like that.
And so, in reading on page 124 of the packet, excerpt of the city code, item B, not more than 35% of the required front yard or a maximum of a 40-foot wide driveway shall be hard surfaced or used for driveways. So I was reading this and that "or" word in there jumped out at me. And I haven't done the calculations to see what the percentage of, I'd consider his front yard the entire frontage on the roadway, in my opinion. And so if he was looking at not more than 35% of the required front yard, could that, what he has, be allowable because of that word "or" in the code?
Well, when we looked at it last time, the interpretation, or I guess that's the right word to use, that it was a maximum 40-foot was left in there as it could, in a smaller lot, it could be 35% of the required front yard or a maximum. And then that's the way, I guess my understanding was that the max allowed is that 40-foot at the garage line, but everything is subject to interpretation,
Right,
so
that's
we
the
can
gray
check
part
into it.
that I was struggling with in reading this, so. Maybe as we move forward then, if the council would support it, can we send kind of the question back to the planning commission?
By golly, he does. How wide is
For
I mean, I would
what to do in instances like this. And then maybe we have staff recommend, a corrective action for this property that we can address.
What's the address on that one again?
I mean, is there something that we have written down that if someone does something without a permit, whether it being concrete work, a shed, a deck, whatever, is there a fee if they do it without the proper channels? Or is there no, is that it's clearly listed somewhere that if you do not abide by this, you will get charged X amount, or is it not that cut and dry?
I think it's more like a ticket. I don't know that we have a fee. It's a misdemeanor offense
Yes,
to
it is a mystery.
break the city's code, so it'd be more of a ticket. I don't know that there's a,
Oh, man, way to go, Garrett, thank you.
what happened?
Bringing to attention other issues.
What I brought up about that house.
Oh. Jennifer, do we have so anyone that, what Beth was asking, anyone that, moves forward with a permit or construction without a permit or a nonconformance, that's by code, by law, it's a misdemeanor, but is there a fee assigned to those things?
Here, let's see.
A penalty or a?
Since I've been here, we have not had to do that, but I'm just gonna read the code here on.
I mean, not that I wanna sit and just start ticketing all the community members, but I also don't wanna sit and act like nothing's wrong and then people just stop
Right.
getting permits because they'll just ask for forgiveness later and think that nothing ever gets done. So just having some accountability that people do use the proper channels, if at all possible.
there's reference to citations. I would have to, I think the mayor's correct, and I'd have to read through here further. Typically, I think the standard language is you're guilty of a misdemeanor, and how all that equates to fines, I'd have to do more research. I couldn't tell you right now, but I sure will look into it.
Yeah, on page 111, there's the procedure upon discovery of a violation. And so if there's work actively occurring, and the building official issues a stop work order, if that's failed, failure to immediately cease and desist shall result in the owner or operator being charged with a misdemeanor. But it doesn't mention any fine or fee amount to that. So Jennifer, I think as we move forward, I think we know that we need to address the situation. So if we can send kind of the question to the planning commission, you know, what is the appropriate language in the code to allow people, I mean, and maybe they say, well, we don't want to allow people to have a parking pad next to their garage. Maybe that's the, you know, the decision. But if they can have that discussion and see if there's any recommended code language changes, and then if staff can provide maybe some options for how to address the violation now known, what that looks like, so we can address that with Mr. Fromm.
And then I think too is if he decides to do a 4-stall garage, what does that look like? I mean,
Right.
are we allowing them or not? I think that's kind of a case by case. I don't think most lots are like this that can even allow that.
Yeah, won't even fit for it.
So I think that sounds like a good plan. You know, and the other problem we've kind of talked about is some of these things around town, you know, and this is something that needs to be discussed too at the planning commission. The city isn't actively out looking and inspecting every property to find violations, but I think as permits come in and if a violation, and I'll check with some other cities as well, but I think that's kind of the time when you address some of those issues. If you see it, kind of like in this situation, the city's not driving around trying to make life hard for anybody, but it's also hard to approve something when you have something that is not conforming with code. So we will take it to the planning commission and come back with some more information and a path to try to come to a resolution here.
Does that sound acceptable to the rest of the council? All right. The next item, we have fire department members here. Pricing on a new air compressor.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council. I went and got a second quote and revamped a quote on a air compressor for filling our self-contained breathing apparatus. So I think you have both quotes on the agenda, Jennifer, if I'm correct?
Yes, it is on.
The first quote I have is from Alex Air Apparatus. They have representatives in Lake Crystal and South Bend Township. Our repair person comes from South Bend, our salesperson comes from Lake Crystal. Actually, two people come out of Lake Crystal. We've used Alex in the past. That is the provider of our current air compressor, which is 35 years old. And is failing. It's had a good life, but it's not keeping up. And repair of this compressor is going to be probably half the cost of a new compressor, which they don't make parts for this particular compressor anymore. The other quote I got was from Sandry Fire. I tried to find a comparable compressor to a Bauer, and Mako is probably the closest that I can find. Sandry is out of Iowa. I did check with them to make sure that they're allowed to sell the Mako in the state of Minnesota, because a lot of this stuff is territorialized. They have to stick within a territory, and the current Mako, the former Mako supplier is switching to a different brand compressor, and their process isn't quite complete yet. Couple of the differences, they did both provide a shipping on there, although there's an estimate provided with Sandry. They've got it listed with Alex as a firm $1,200. These things are not light. Travel and install, there's a little difference in price on that, and the compressors are comparable. We did have to look at sound guarding the compressor because of where it is in the fire station, because you work around it, it's not in a remote area. So we have to take firefighter safety into account there. So they both meet the comparable sound decibels that come out of the compressor while it's running. And we will need new cylinders for that. Both of them have them listed here. We would go to a 6,000 pound cylinder. This compressor would be able to go to 6,000 pounds. And both compressors are out at least 8 weeks if we were to order them today. And we're also looking at probably price increases coming up in January.
So does the department have a preference for the manufacturer? I mean, is there anything that's kind of proprietary that you need to be meeting?
Alex Air Apparatus is taking care of us quite well. If there's an issue, they come over. If the gentleman's on his way out in the morning, he's over on his way back at night. Service is right here. Service from Sandry Fire would have to come out of DeWitt, Iowa. We have not purchased anything from Sandry at this point. Not saying that we never would, but Alex has served us well.
Yeah, that was just my biggest question is, you know, have we ever used Sandry? And obviously, they're the lower cost one per the quotes, but sometimes lower cost isn't the best option. So I just wanted to ask that question, if there was, you know, kind of items that were proprietary that we needed to meet or match or.
One thing too is that the Bauer compressor carries a 5-year warranty on it, and Mako, you have to purchase the 5-year extended warranty on them. And that's not included in this price here, so that could be the price difference in them. Usually when you're purchasing something that's an extended warranty, you're paying for a repair. We would have to have an electrician do the hookup on it. They do not provide an electrician on that. And I guess the closest station that has the one that Alex Apparatus has is Winnebago has the Verticus that they have listed here. I've talked to the chief down there in the past, and they really like their compressor. The Mako compressor, I know Faribault has a model that is similar. In the room that they have it in, they still have to wear earmuffs in that room, but it is a tiny room when they're running that compressor, so. But we do like the Alex Air Apparatus version. And after talking with several people in the department, that's what they would like to go with, something that's proven in the past. So we've been happy with it for 35 years.
Does council have any questions in regard to the quotes? Looks like the fire department is requesting the purchase of, you said that was a Verticus, that's what, Bauer?
That is a Bauer compressor, yes.
At the slightly higher price of $36,550 rather than the Mako brand one from Sandry.
I think local service and also just the warranty length, I think that more than warrants and makes up for that small amount of difference between the two.
I would agree.
Local service is huge.
Well, and from a business standpoint, you worked with them in the past, they know you, you know them, you know what you're getting, you know, from the service end of it too, and from just the business, so, that means something in my eyes too, of, and then what your department would prefer to have too, you're the ones working with it, and Dan did show me in person what his current compressor does, and that is very worrisome from my end of it, where if you can't fill compressors and you can't fill tanks and get out and have them full, and you're sending guys out with stuff that's not in working condition, that's not okay. So I'm all in favor and would make the motion to do it. Now, I think the next piece though was where the funding comes from, but I'd be in favor of going with the Alex over the Sandry. I don't know if it's motion ready at this point, if we have to talk next on
You
where the
can-
funding's coming from.
You can make a motion. Yeah, we can talk about funding.
I don't know if they're part of the same motion or two different motions, but I would make the motion to allow the Alex Air Apparatus Company do the Verticus compressor.
All right, we have a motion on the table. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Maybe now is the time for any other discussion in regard to expenditures. What we've got in the packet, we've got $21,700 in capital outlay planned for next year's expenditure on this piece of equipment was kind of the plan. So we're shy about $15,000. And my opinion is I would like to keep all of the American Rescue Plan funds for the water situation that we've got coming up. I know that you've had some good gambling results in the COVID years here. What's that?
Pandemic, vices.
Pandemic related. So, I mean, I guess my opinion was that was kind of the purpose of the gambling funds, is to get that equipment. And, you know, if you've got funds available, from what we had in here was $91,000 to do the additional upcharge from the 21.7 to get us to the 36. I guess that's what I'd like to see, but I'm only one on the council.
I echo what you say about using the gambling funds, if that's what that's to be used for, enhancing equipment for the fire department, and understanding that this water issue, especially now hearing that Mankato's not interested in doing regionalization, we'll have to take that matter into our own hands pretty soon.
That is what gambling funds are for?
That is what gambling funds are for. That's why I brought the gambling
The
manager
gambling man
along.
is here?
The gambling manager.
Can I say something?
Yep.
I know, I guess that you're right, I absolutely agree with that as far as the gambling funds. I think we've been very fortunate over the years. But yet there's still, a side that, you know, you kind of look at the city, these are city responsibilities, and then you got these, unreliable, income source that you hope can supplement in places
Well, and we've been advised that this purchase is probably not, I don't want to say eligible, but from what we've been given is that it may be more of an auditable expense. The first go-round of COVID money was a free-for-all. You know, and I was even concerned about spending some of those dollars on things we did spend it on. You know, so the recommendations that we've been given is to not utilize these funds for this. You know, and now if we found that the funds are not even available for, you know, water issues, that might be a different story, but what we've been given is, you know, we shouldn't be doing that. So, I mean, we have tried to save for this apparatus, so it's not like the city hasn't, you know, been planning for the expenditure.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm also, you know, everybody wants to protect their income source, right? So that's, you know, that you're doing that, we're kind of doing that.
Well, all of our income is really all in the same pot, so.
Well, I understand, but you know, the usage and so on. So then I'm just looking at, you know, if we have the opportunity to use an influx of money that wouldn't normally be there and to benefit something like that. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Yeah, no, I don't want it to be a feeding frenzy of departments coming to say, let's get our hands on this free money, because it's not free money. We're going to be paying for this for years upon years. And I know a lot of communities have rejected the money and have given it all back and said, we're not going to play your game, you know, to avoid that. But
I'm just stating that if there's a way that, you know, we can benefit a purchase like that. Completely understand the allocation for the water piece of it, because that's a big chunk, no matter what. So,
I think, have we gotten approval that the ARP money can be used for water? I ask because even reading Jamie's email, you know, just paraphrasing, because it's an apparatus that firefighters use in their normal line of work and isn't in response to the pandemic. Well, water isn't in response to the pandemic either. So the water would technically be on the risky side.
Well, it's very interesting. So I'm going to be going to a conference coming up in November, and there's going to be a roundtable of cities talking about what they're going to be using the funding for. But overwhelmingly, and I was just part of I think it was a League of Minnesota Cities webinar not that long ago, most cities are going to be using them for water and sewer infrastructure. So I will, you know, I agree when you read through what she's saying about it's not in direct response to the pandemic. There is language in there, and I'll have to get that to show you guys. But it seems like most cities are going to be using their money for infrastructure. So we would definitely run it by the auditor, make sure everything is in line. But I believe a lot of cities are going to be using it for infrastructure purposes. A lot of this stuff is very confusing with ARP. That's why so many cities still haven't decided how they're going to use their funding. There are all these organizations like the League, the Minnesota, or Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. Everybody's having these roundtables because, you know, we're all in this together, trying to figure out what's the best way to use these funds. So.
well, we're in the discussion phase at this point still, so we have a motion and a second to approve the purchase of the air compressor from Alex Air. It's just, again, continuing on our discussion of funding. If anyone has any additional thoughts on that, I guess now is the time. Using gambling versus whatever this is called, ARP funds.
For me, I don't know if we've talked enough on the ARP funds to know exactly what they're being used for, because I mean, I think the next thing is the microphones. Are we using ARP for these microphones, which, in my opinion, I don't even want them. You know, I'd rather put that $5,000 to the air compressor at that point, but can't change that. So it's hard for me to say one way or another on also being contradictory on the water could be a high-risk piece too, and allowing this versus that, but, so I don't know. I do know that I think it's a highly needed piece, and however we can help, we want to. I don't know if that's using the ARP or not. I look for the others too.
Thoughts, comments?
I think the problem with ARP is we ask the question, now we have an answer. That is probably not gonna conform, so we'll have to work through that piece. Whether the water will conform or not, but we, unfortunately, be good or bad, we've asked that question. But I think we need to take a look at that and see what else there is, if we can make that work. I do get the understand, I think we get that, there's certain responsibility that the city should always step up and do, and I think we've tried to do that. Obviously, we've got funds all over not all over the place, but we're really planful about, big capital expenditures like that. It looks like that we save portions of them every year. Sometimes things have to be pulled forward, and that's, I think, where we're getting to that crunch, that we have to pull them forward. That they're 35 years old.
And I don't want to disrespect what the city provides for the park at all. So please don't construe it that way. It's just that I know in the past, that's just how it's worked. And you said it, it's all really same dollar.
Right.
But like I said, if there's a way, I think that's a great way to handle it, because the gambling fund can be used somewhere else to provide something that we might not be able to normally have. So that's all. Like I said, if it works, great. If you're okay with it, great. If you don't, you know what, it's a piece of equipment that we need, and we're gonna get it.
All right, we need to get it ordered. It's just a matter of how we pay for it, so.
Can I interrupt? I know I'm kind of out of turn here.
We're still in conversation.
Okay, thank you. So I pulled back up an email from Jamie. We were talking about the ARP funds, and there's so much information out there. That's why so many cities and organizations are wrestling with it. There's just a lot of unknowns here. But basically, the general eligible uses were categorized as responding to a public health emergency. In other words, vaccine support programs, testing, support for access to medical services, responding to the negative impacts of the pandemic. An example would be assistance to households or businesses, premium pay for essential workers, revenue replacement for reduction revenue due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and then investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. So it would be any construction of publicly owned treatment works, projects that support efforts to address climate change, improvements to broadband. So that's where I'm saying it's not, when you talk about addressing the pandemic, and then they throw in climate change stuff in there. So I don't think it's super, I think we need to get an opinion from our auditor on whether or not, when we know how we want to spend the money, whether it's we did that with the compressor here, we did it with the microphones, and we would do it with water and sewer infrastructure as well. I don't think it's something that just a lay person can say, yep, this is gonna be an eligible use. I think it's a little more complicated than that.
Any other discussion? Well, we have a motion and a second on the table to approve the purchase of the air compressor from Alex Air. I would call for that vote, so all in favor of that motion, say aye. Any opposed? And that carries. And so let's get it ordered. Typically, I don't know how the gambling fund checks are written. Is that something that we do in city office, or is that something that comes from the fire department?
It actually comes out of,
Comes
from the city, from the account with the city.
But you guys give us the gambling funds.
Yes.
Yes.
It would come out of that account. So what I would like to propose is that we utilize the $21,700 in capital outlay, utilize the remainder from gambling funds currently, We can continue to ask the questions on acceptability of use of ARP funds for water infrastructure. And if it turns out that that's not an allowable use, then we could pay back the gambling funds if need be, if that's the way we so choose. That way it would protect that fund as well, but at this point, let's get it ordered and get it rolling, because you said it's 8 weeks, right? So
At least 8 weeks out. I'm asking for them to deliver it just after the first year, if they would bill us. So the capital outlay that we have,
we could get another year's.
well, it gets us into when the capital outlay is supposed to be used, which is in 2022.
But does that 21.7 include the 2022 amount as well?
I think it does on there, if I read it correctly.
Or would we possibly have a little bit of extra? Because it looks like we had $1,800.42, or $1,842.11 scheduled for 2022 to go into the fund. But that's not getting me to the. You'll have to take a look at that, Jennifer, or maybe I'm looking at the wrong line.
I'm sorry, I was looking at something else. I believe, so what that's showing then, let's see here.
Yeah, I was looking at the
Replacement cost
25,750 above there. And that was for the Jaws of Life line, I think is what we had in that account.
So it looks like what we've been budgeting for, though, is for a total cost of that 21,700, if I'm reading this right. If that answers the question.
But at any rate, yeah, the expenditure could be made at that point in 2022 if they don't need any money down.
Yep. They shouldn't need any money down, but
Okay.
I will talk to the sales rep tomorrow.
All right. Get her ordered.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. All right, then the next item is the new microphones, as Beth alluded to, on the council chambers.
All right, I'm gonna just pull this out. I lost my spot on there, so I will move on over here. So we are borrowing 2 microphones right now, and we had replaced the one on the podium. And I got a proposal from VSI for what's I guess they're referred to as used because someone ordered them and then very lightly used. The total would be just a little bit under 5,000. If we purchased them brand new, they'd be about 7,300. And again, I did check with the auditor, and she said that I know the consensus here is not to use these funds for that purpose, but she had said it would be consistent in that we had purchased the equipment initially to be able to live stream the meeting, have that ability to be able to communicate with the public when we are in situations like a pandemic and people can't come to the meeting in person. So I guess I'll leave it up to the council if I guess there's a couple issues it sounds like. Do we even want to get new microphones? And if we do, how do we want to pay for it? And we, could dip into capital outlay funds for City Hall or general government, or use ARP funds too if that ends up being an option down the road and the other preferred projects don't get funded using those funds. So.
Well, first question then, do we want new microphones? I don't know if we can tell right now how many people we have viewing. I know the last couple. No, how many
have
people
8
are
people
viewing our
watching.
live stream currently? Okay.
5 watching.
Is anybody on in the building here? Sometimes I've put it on here too, just to see if there's anything. Has anyone listened to one of our recordings just to see how we sound? It seems better.
I did after the last meeting, one listened, or I did. I don't know if Carrie did too. I'm sorry looking at you, but yes, it did sound a lot better for the people that use it. And Beth, you always speak loudly so I can hear you. That's not an issue, but I could tell a difference.
With these mics or with the SM 48s, 58s, I mean.
I could hear the mayor very clearly last meeting versus other meetings. And Denny Terrell was listening at the last meeting and sent me a message too, I believe, saying that he could hear. I'm pretty sure it was Denny that sent me a message. I'll confirm that, but.
Yeah, because that's been a
You
struggle.
wouldn't have to constantly hold your mic.
What's that?
She wouldn't constantly have to hold the
Right.
mic.
And as I say, if we get them, we have to get one for everybody, cause this dancing around
No,
over there
yeah.
is crazy.
How many do we need at the 1, 2, 3? Was it the 9? 1, 2,
Yeah, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Yep.
6, 7, 8, 9. Yep, so
Right.
then
So that
every
was the total.
place- Yep. Yeah.
As much as the technology drives me absolutely crazy, because looking back, 8 views, 14 views, I mean, it's not like there's a lot of people viewing.
Right.
But we have made this very large purchase last year, so to have microphones that really don't work or that you have to lick to hear is not very appealing either, or share. So I would make the motion to purchase the used new microphones as proposed from VSI.
All right, so we have a motion to purchase the 9 used microphones. Is there a second?
I would second that, being probably the quiet one.
I would second you being the quiet one too.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? I just wanted to mention too that I guess as I was looking at this issue, especially in light of the fire department issue, again, continuity-wise, I would again recommend we don't use ARP funds for this, even though this would be a legitimate use, because, I mean, that's really the purpose of why we put this into place, was for video streaming for the pandemic. But I do think we have other funds that we can find the $4,800 out of for consistency, and so I agree that we need to look at that. And I would say we could take it out of, as you say, City Hall, repair and maintenance budget, or even just
How about general
our
government? Would that be okay?
reserves.
Yeah, general government
Yeah.
reserves, if that's okay?
Yep.
And it ends with 550. Okay,
Did we vote? I don't think we did yet, did we? Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. Under the other items, we've covered water regionalization. The Mayor for a Day essay contest was submitted to the school here, so, and I'm trying to remember it. So the question was, the city provides fire, police, parks, and other services. If you were the mayor for a day, how would you improve one of those areas in your community? So hopefully we'll get some takers on that. We've had some interesting essays in the past, but we'll see what the kids come up with. Jennifer, do you want to add anything on the informational item on the non-conforming fence?
Sure, I'll just do a real quick update. In working with the property owner, he is cooperating with the city. He informed me this morning an update that he is planning to remove the fence this weekend, and he's gonna meet with Public Works, I believe, on Wednesday afternoon, to just make sure everything is staked out appropriately. It's a very unfortunate situation, and I see where the property owner is frustrated, but I also, have to go back to how, what we put on our building permits and what we tell people when they come in. We give everybody information about the requirements, especially fences. We always give a handout of code. So it is unfortunate how it happened, but I do feel that, we met on site with the property owner. We explained to the contractor and the property owner why it's so important to have a survey done of your property so you know where your property lines are at. When Brian and I were out there, the property pin was exposed. It was very obvious, and we said, well, here's your pin, and I have a picture that I included in my packet, so it was obvious that they were outside of their property. And I think what had ended up happening is that the property owner expressed in his email, which I included in the packet, that there was some misunderstanding or not knowing that outside the property line to the curb was not the property owner's property to be using, it's the city's right of way. So it's unfortunate, but I don't know that there's anything the city could do differently other than trying to, we've added a new page, which I emailed out, that we're gonna put, that we already have on top of our applications, just highlighting important information, reminding people, encouraging people to get a survey done so they know where their property pins are located. The city is not a surveyor. We can't tell somebody where their property pins are located. Property pins can be moved as well when there's construction or utilities or doing work. They're not supposed to be moved, but they can be moved. So I guess the issue is gonna be resolved here, and so I just wanted to include it on the agenda and give an update.
Okay. You can roll right into your city administrator's report then. Okay, I'll try to run through this as quick as I can. So just real quick update on the lawnmower claim. Last July, one of our employees was hit while riding a mower across the street. We worked with our insurance, and they were able to collect on the cost to repair the mower, and fortunately the employee was not injured. The next item, we continue to get complaints from residents about the crossing being rough at over on can't think of, yes, east of town, thank you. I can't think of the CASA thing right now, sorry. But we did receive a response from Canadian Pacific Railroad finally saying that they're going to be sending out a crew in the next couple of weeks to make it smoother. So hopefully that will end up happening. And then next thing, you guys are aware of our population count from the last census here and household counts. And it's exciting for Eagle Lake. Since 2010, when the last census was completed, our population has increased about 35%. We've already talked about the agency project with Brian Sarf being here. We did mail out a newsletter to all affected properties. We got notice of issuance of our coverage under for our MS4 permit. Manganese sampling request from Minnesota Department of Health. Public Works Director Brian Gettle has been in contact with Minnesota Department of Health and is willing to cooperate with their request for sampling. And I understand they request samples from all water suppliers. So, and as we talked about manganese possibly helping the city get some funding coming up with our levels to address that. Pedestrian connectivity study update. At a recent TAC meeting, there was a recommendation for requests for proposal for studies in the 2022 Unified Planning Work Program. Included in that is the Eagle Lake Connectivity Study. And so that study will be getting underway here and hopefully wrapping up in December of 2022, and we'll have some ideas of possible solutions to the connectivity issue there and be able to move forward with making some changes. DNR park inspection, I had an email from the Minnesota DNR. They recently completed a visit to Eagle Lake to inspect sites funded by DNR grants. They do this every 5 years. Looked like everything was in order. The one feedback was we needed to have ADA accessible paths to the playgrounds, and ironically that was done, I think, between the time the lady was on site and then when the contractor, so I was able to email her a picture, and so we're good to go on that. Budget and wage study update. We're starting to get some of those final numbers in for health insurance and some other items, so I will be inputting those into the budget, and that'll be updated accordingly for your review. And then we've got survey data for the wage studies is in from the cities that responded, and so now it's just kind of analyzing that information and then getting it ready. So we've got some recommendations formulated to go to the personnel committee first, and then to the city council with a goal of getting
any changes implemented for January 1st. And then there's gonna be a 1 Million Cups event coming up in Eagle Lake on November 17th. We've got 2 businesses that will be presenting, Kim Dashner with Dash Salon and Jake Schramm with Hometown Fitness, and that will be held here at City Hall. I heard I'm supposed to be getting a flyer here shortly to be able to promote that, and that's open to the community. And then I think my last item here is a Shop Local campaign community holiday event. We're trying to maybe do a collaboration between EDA, the fire department, police department, and try to get something coordinated, and businesses. So I know I'm gonna rely heavily on Carrie to kind of help with the coordination of that and planning, and I guess to be determined, we'll get some more information out about that, so. And with that, I think that's all I've got.
All right, are there any council member reports or questions on the city administrator's report? All right. And I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Would anyone like to second that? John, you're gonna do that? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. We're adjourned. Thank you.